Hello folks, hope you're having a wonderful middle of your week now, I suppose. Where has the sun gone? It's supposed to be June, how annoying, but the sun has gone and is now completely cloudy all day, but hey, it is what it is. Some of the hobby nightmares we've been getting are quite long. I'm having to keep my voice down a little bit because my grandpa is trying to sleep, and he is back now, he is on the mend, which is nice. And yeah, let's get to it, shall we? If you like what I do, the subscribe button is down below, the Patreon button is also down below, if you want to buy me a beer or do anything like that to help out the channel. So, moving swiftly onwards then to our first hobby nightmare of the day, the shorter one of two. It is from Tucker, and Tucker says, "Hello, Lord Exilus of the Northern Sector." Cheers, man. Thank you. "I have a recent experience during a game at Warhammer World. I had a game of Horus Heresy with a fellow wargamer at Warhammer World recently. My World Eaters versus his Iron Warriors, mainly infantry with support and heavy support options in the guise of a Kratos battle tank. Now, given their Legion trait is to swap out chain axes wherever possible, this means there was a lot of resin parts in my army, hence their fragile nature. Eventually, this will be a breakages in transit. Eventually, there will be breakages in transit, which I fixed when I arrived. Totally unavoidable, but it is what it is. Anyhow, we are good to go. Having deployed, with good line of sight for my Kratos versus my opponent's Rhinos and Spartan, and Dreadnought and heavy support options. I had a Dreadnought, infantry and jetbag support from the flanks, alongside a custom-built chaplain and a 10-man Rampager squad, and a 5-man Red Butchers squad. My key aim was to get into combat as soon as possible, winning first turn. I managed to destroy a Rhino in the first salvo of las cannon fire, exploding and taking out a decent chunk of infantry. However, this was the only positive to my side of the table. I managed to fluff every single charge roll, even with charge buffs in the Rite of War I had chosen. This is when the first model snapped. A chain axe on a despoiler marine. It broke into 3 pieces. Oh, that sucks. 3 pieces is the worst. Anyhow, putting the break aside, we continued the game. My dice rolls from charges, attacks to save rolls were just as ineffective as before, to the point that by the time we went for a lunch break of turn 2, nearly 75% of my total force was wiped out. This is when things went really, really bad. During lunch, according to our neighbouring games, somebody walked past our table with a backpack on and managed to swipe half of the squad off of the table. Fortunately, they bounced miraculously, and the culprit kindly put the models on my seat under the table. I'm sure you see where this is going. The models knocked off were already dead according to game progress, so I didn't notice their absence initially, until I pulled the stool from under the table. Half a dozen models went flying across the floor, some snapping plastic bits off, easy fixes, others snapping at resin joints, not so easy. As I went to collect them, a fellow gamer walked past me, unaware of the last model in the middle of the walkway. He managed to step on it, cracking and splitting the model in places I didn't even know it could break. But this was no simple Space Marine, it was my custom-built chaplain with a number of resin parts and sculpted parts on it, broken beyond repair. My god. Writing off the repair at that time, I put the remains of the chaplain along with the other broken parts back in my box. The game went to the end of turn 3. I had only one lowly assault marine left, with a badly damaged Spartan in the rear. I conceded the loss and packed up our belongings. I could be salty about the whole affair, but it's just a game after all. I congratulated my friend on the win, spoke about his MVP for the game, his Leviathan, and have agreed to have a rematch later this month, even laughing about the whole affair. I'm yet to repair the models broken due to working shifts, but we'll get round to it soon. Hope you are well and your granddad is on the mend now. Cheers, man. Kind regards, Matt. Dude, you have a much higher tolerance for, you know, bad luck horse shittery than I do. I'm telling you now. You are that is cool. You are a sound guy to have a game with. I'm thinking a lot of people watching this video will be kind of horrified and wondering what they would do in that situation. I'm probably coming to the conclusion that they would end up headbutting the table until they fell into unconsciousness. Merciful, lovely, sweet oblivion. But, you know, good for you, man, for keeping a positive outlook. I have to say, my hat is off to you. Well done. Well done, sir. JP Streetman says, this is an epically long tale, by the way, so hopefully it's going to be a good one, because if it isn't, I'll be stopping halfway through, because this is a role-playing story, and role-playing stories have a tendency to go on for quite some time. When people are going, here is my backstory to my one character. It is 17 pages long. So I don't need to know that. Just tell me the hobby nightmare, please. So, let's move on. The JP Streetman story, and hope that it's succinct, because it's about 10 pages. So it's an epic one, but I've been told it's very good. Let's jump in. So, JP says, hey North, thanks for all you do. That's no problem. First, I would like to apologise for my rambling and insecure last submission. I was in a rough place, being made to move a month earlier than I expected. Then getting into a car accident in my freshly fixed car. $900 of work down the drain. And then a month of saving up to move out has taken it from me. It sucked, and I was really not in a nice place. No problem, man. We're all there sometimes. Anyway, now that that's out the way, I want to tell you a tragic saga that happened to me, and I want to tell it in its entirety. Even if it's not read on the channel, well it is, even just typing it out and maybe talking about it to someone uninvolved with the situation would take something a giant off of my back. So, there's 5,000 odd words, so I understand if you split it up or choose not to read it for the channel. If you decide to split it up, I've broken it into parts at the natural stopping places. So, thank you for doing that, by the way. That shows an incredible amount of foresight, so thank you for doing that. I probably am going to read it all, because I've been told it's really good. And hey, Pirate Kings was like twice this size, so I think we'll be okay. So without further ado, sit back, maybe grab a snack and a drink, and let me tell you about this saga of Ayera, the life and death of a Pathfinder server. Ooh, okay. So, Part 0. Important background. To tell the tale as it happened in its entirety, I need to clarify some terms, and tell a little bit of the history from before I enter the tale, so that some of the conflicts, actions, and outcomes make sense to you. Pathfinder 1st Edition is a famously large system, with 11 years of active rule support and dozens of fan-made and third-party rule additions. Character creation is incredibly granular, and there are hundreds of options. This, in my opinion, is great, as the amount of flavour you can milk out of your character, even early on, is simply astounding, and a savvy GM can tune and flavour his game by adding, excluding, and generally curating optional source books and rules. It does, however, have the downside of being quite breakable, as a bad faith player can completely outstrip game scaling. Yeah, this is something that I struggled with as well in my own writing. This is North talking, by the way. Mainly because I used to love writing rules. It was one of my main things that I used to love to do, especially for RPGs that I would run and things like that. Is I'd write a lot of rules, but I also found that there were certain people in my group that if I didn't explicitly tell them not to do something, or that they couldn't do something, even though the rules said they could, you know, a lot of people will break your rules by omission. Okay, a lot of new people who write rules, right? A lot of new people who write rule books, they tend to trust their gamers a little bit too much, in that they'll make a rule set, yeah, and they'll make it in a way that can be broken quite easily. But they'll just trust their players not to do that. They'll trust their players to not be dicks. Whereas the players will be dicks, they will break the rules, and they'll make completely broken characters, and they'll say, well, hey, the rules don't say I can't. Yeah? One thing is, I generally don't play with those people. If somebody does that to me once, I don't invite them back. I'm just like, no, dude, you make characters that are way too much for the game I'm trying to play. You're clearly here to win, quote unquote, even though it's a collaborative game, right? So no, you either change that or you don't come back, essentially, you know. But yeah, I do look at Pathfinder sometimes and think that it got away. It's a game that got away from them. You know, there are so many rules, it's impossible to balance properly. And they also rely on that stupid rule that I really don't like, where people say, hey, if you don't like a rule, just change it. No, dude, it's your responsibility. I paid for this book. Write the rules properly so that they don't get broken by everybody. Anyway, moving on. A living world is a very specific, community-driven way to play Pathfinder. The format works best in Discord, and it involves quite a large amount of people sharing the same game world. Staff such as admins, moderators, lore writers, and GMs all handle the duties of making the community work and keeping games going, telling stories for each other and the players. Ayera was the name of one such server. It was very high fantasy, high power, living world that ran frequent games for almost 2 years. That length is nominally a success in the wider community, with longer lasting projects existing along with quite a few fast failures. But the faults in Ayera ran deep, in some ways the problems running back to the very beginning of the server and beyond. Spheres of Power and Might, henceforth referred to simply as Spheres, is an incredibly popular third-party supplement for Pathfinder that could easily serve as a replacement for all the base classes, specialising, spellcasting mechanics, and so many other things. It would practically be a total conversion of the game, and if you choose to run a Spheres campaign game rather than a base rules game, things would be fine. The intention of the system, in my opinion, seemed to be an attempt to fix the caster/martial imbalance that exists in base Pathfinder. I don't like Spheres. I don't think it's fun to build a character with, or it's smooth to play. But that's a subjective opinion. Many others swear by it. The issues with it come when we assume that because they technically use the same basic architecture of levels, XP, armor class, and the like, you can easily use both Spheres and the base game in the same game at the same time. Gestalt classes in an optional rules Gestalt classes is an optional rule that allows you to play what is essentially 2 classes at once. I love this rule. It gives you so many opportunities for unique and memorable combinations. For example, my primary character was an elemental air sorcerer and a wilderness scout rogue at the same time, leveling both classes at the same rate. She had all the lightning turret damage potential of the sorcerer and the skill utility of the rogue, leading to a multi-talented character that can do lots of different things at once. Seems pretty overpowered to me. It's pretty cool, but again, the issue is that a bad faith or unimaginative player would quite simply be able to use this to munchkin all the harder. The easier power combo in this vein is just whatever martial class you wanted with vanilla blank slate fighter. Now, instead of being a wide character that is versatile and can use multiple tools, you're a tall character, just a barbarian ++, or a gunslinger ++, or a swashbuckler ++. You get the idea. Mythic rules are yet another system that adds an extra option layer of progression on the player. You have 10 tiers of mythic abilities, all escalating in power, and all tied to a number of different serious things, but especially the story. It's intended for the GM to pick a couple of options off of the basic list when the player gets a mythic tier, and present them to the player to choose. Mythic power is supposed to be a big deal, and very story relevant. A devil, for instance, might grant you a mythic tier in exchange for your soul. An awakening demigod might gain mythic tiers as their divine blood takes over, or perhaps a legendary weapon or item like Excalibur or the One Ring would grant you your mythic tiers. Of course, to adapt this to a public setting and to alleviate work for the GMs, mythic tiers were awarded upon reaching levels 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 and 20, and then the last 4 could be bought with 1,000,000 XP past level 20. Of course, all players get to pick from the full list of abilities. there is definitely no way that this system can get gamed or abused at all. Obviously, no way to abuse this at all. Yeah, I know, this sounds like a train wreck. This sounds like an absolute train wreck. I know mythic abilities in Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, the video game, they're broken as hell on that. Imagine having an entire setting full of people exactly like that. Dude. You're basically like having them all be chosen ones. That's not good. And thus, the stage presents itself. You have a tabletop RPG game, almost entirely open to the public on a much larger scale than the usual game, with divided GM attention and an essentially lobby-based play pattern, where a GM would fill each session with a party made from the people who signed up. We are using pretty much all the optional rules and a total conversion mod alongside vanilla, with such a host of options that no person, no individual, can truly be expected to know every rule. It's an environment ripe for attracting munchkins, who can hit critical mass, and maybe begin to spawn more of their own kind, as they drive the power curve further and further, as the back and middle of that curve struggle to keep up. Just a little foreshadowing there. Oh my god. The final bit of setup needed, in part 0, is the recent history by the time the story's true beginning. Before Ayera, there were many living worlds, all with the same basic awesome idea of high-powered fantasy at its core. And the previous one, Babel. Babel was in the hands of the Munchkins. Oh no. There was quite a lot of discontent, and to boot, Nurgle's blessing and lockdowns were just beginning. There was drama, fracturing, a rift, and two groups of players split off from that place to form Ayera, a fresh start in a vast and empty world. These factions are a group of narrative players who want to use the incredible potential for storytelling that the high-power systems can provide, but not to break the game open, and a group of munchkins no longer welcomed or happy in the place due to not being able to out-munchkin the rulers there, or other personal reasons. This is where I, your narrator, enter the scene. I am bored out of my skull in lockdown, stuck in my parents' house over the summer, despite having moved out to college a couple of years earlier, and coming out of a game of D&D that I had appreciated greatly, but which ended far too early. I'm a complete noob to Pathfinder, catching a server advertisement for Ayera on Reddit, basically within the first week of the server booting up. Alright, here we go. So preamble is over. It's like me reading you an audiobook. This is awesome. This is great. If you guys would like more long-form content like this, let me know. Because there's certain times when I'm just in the mood for it, and today's one of those times. So, part 1. The early days, the happy days. The earliest days on the server are a shining memory for me. I will eagerly cherish it forever. Everyone was in high spirits, making fresh characters, growing through the early levels, and forming character relationships as we all grew together. People were massively helpful to me as a noob, and I spent all of my waking hours in lockdown cramming rules and lore as if I was cramming for finals. I threw myself in with such vigour and delight that I quickly established myself in the community. It was a genuinely good experience to play there, and I loved it. Being a storyteller and GM by temperament, and with the rules knowledge threshold for running a game rapidly approaching, I applied to run games and write lore after a few months, and was accepted proudly into the ranks of the server staff, where my closer friendships would eventually form, and where the hidden politics of the behind-the-scenes world would manifest the most. Oh no. I'm sorry, man. I'm already dreading this. Part 2. Fracturing fault lines. Okay, so we're already past the good stuff. Brilliant. I would like to introduce you to a couple of people in the story. Their relationships and issues from the very beginning forming the tragic flaw of division that would doom the server to oblivion. Oh no. Alright, Ona. One of the sweetest, loveliest people I have ever known. She was firmly in the narrative camp, having been in the final straw in the split on the last server, coming over here to make a place for role-playing and role-playing. Okay, cool. Sorry, for role-playing over role and then playing. Good, okay, I like it. Admins 1 and 2, affectionately named Chucklefuck and Douchebag. The mostly absent but quite overbearing other 2/3 of the founding triumvirate, and firmly in the Munchkin camp. They left the last place, because they were bad at staff politics and got themselves booted. Relevant for later. Bitch and Bitch's husband. You're really not bitter at all, are you? Bitch and Bitch's husband. A pair of mods who, shall we say, found it very advantageous to have a double vote on whatever they felt like. Bitch was by far the most active member of staff on enforcement, rules, and improving characters and custom items and the like for play. She cannot stick to one character, and is retraining twice a week. And just not a couple of levels, I'm talking full reworks from point bought stats upwards. Bitch's husband was a munchkin extraordinaire, as well as the power leveling GM. He would run an arena or coliseum game where the full strength party of players would stomp on a couple of waves of enemies for 2 hours, and then give full session rewards of XP and gold. Of course, for the good old boys, he can run this session 4 times in a row, for 4 full sets of rewards in a very long evening. Dude, that sounds like hell to me. That really does sound like hell. Like, yeah, another 4 guardsmen are running towards you. Oh, you've killed them. Great. And here are another 4. You know, oh my god, it sounds horrible. The next character, MMO. Another mod / GM. As the title suggests, he ran games as if they were an MMO game, catering to the Munchkins and running sessions that were high production quality, empty spectacles, dragged out over way too long. All-night marathon raid bosses against foes that are nothing more than blatantly unfair damage checks, scaled for the most absurd standards of power gaming I have yet seen. Morgan, one of my closest friends during that time. I love how all of your friends are getting names. Morgan, one of my closest friends during that time. One of the best GMs I've ever had the pleasure of working with. He really understood how to tell an awesome story in a high power setting, and he was in the narrative camp. There are many others, of course, but these are the people relevant to this story. Now, to some actual horror in this hobby horror story. It's already been quite horrible. For any DM out there, it's already been quite horrible so far. There was a separate forum site, apart from the main server, that hosted a lot of the staff duties. Drafts for the new lore, new character sheets to be approved, people's custom rules they wrote for themselves. Yes, you heard that right, I'll get to that later. And anything else that needed staff approval. It all sat on these forums. There was a very simple system in play. So long as 3 GMs / mods had looked it over and given approval, and no objections were raised, after 24 hours, the thing passed. I would like to direct your attention specifically to Bitch and Bitch's husband. If they wanted to break the forum system, that's 2 votes already. Any time they decided to push something through, they just needed to find 1 more vote and avoid extra scrutiny until the time is up. There are also baby GMs like me who don't necessarily understand the full implications of things, or the bustedness of certain combinations, and who also can be heavily swayed to sign off on things on the basis that it's our job to be on the forums, bullied into essentially just giving the 3rd rubber stamp. This practice led to a blatant favoritism and power gaming by a very simple method. At some point, the staff munchkins introduced the ability to write yourself a custom monster template, to place as another power layer on top of the basic character. Not normally, you would use this sort of thing as a GM to turn your standard orc into a half demon orc or something along those thematic lines. But if you were in the club and had the know-how, you could write yourself a template with a paper-thin lore justification and give yourself extra stats, extra spells, new abilities, and sometimes even just blatantly break the rules, such as uncapping a capped number or letting things stack which don't stack. It's dumb, I know, I thought as much, but everyone was going along with it. And Bitch had pretty much singular practical say in what passed and what didn't. She browbeat, pushed, and ridiculed until she got her own way. My dude, this is like a political epic. This is brilliant. I know a few of you have switched off the video. You're not even gonna hear this bit, but my god, like, I know some of you might be like, this is too long. I'm enjoying the shit out of this. This is great. It's like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or something, but like as a D&D group. So you can imagine, I was already annoyed at Bitch. I hadn't figured that out. No, I mean, you calling her bitch really didn't, you know. Anyway, her husband and the power gamers in general when the snow session went down. The snow session went down. The snow session? Okay. Morgan was running, and he was weaving a tale of fae, lindworms, and witches. A thrilling plot to be sure, but of course, I am the only one paying real attention or taking things seriously. We get trapped in an illusion, and I break us out, which while Bitch whines about how unfair Morgan was for using illusions. Despite that, we eventually approach a fight with one of the villains involved in the plot, a witch and a juvenile lindworm that she dominated with magic. I proudly went to scout ahead. Being both a rogue and a sorcerer, I had invisibility, flight, and a very good stealth score on my side. Perfect for approaching unseen. It was natural as a method of progressing. I was listening in and getting some valuable information when Bitch comes back from pouting about the illusion. She interrupts to ask questions about range and visibility, then unleashes a ray of fire across the map, starting the fight whilst I was eavesdropping on the conversation. The ensuing fight goes poorly for 3 reasons. Number 1. Bitch's husband doesn't think that it's not worth avoiding friendly fire on me, specifically, chunking my health multiple times. Number 2, Bitch's character is using lawful stupid as an alignment and therefore doesn't let the lindworm, technically evil but non-hostile, once the domination magic is broken, retreat back to the Feyworld. Everything is balanced for the runway munchkin power level that you needed to balance for as a GM so you wouldn't get curb stomped. My character gets knocked out clean cold, mostly by friendly fire, and I just come away from the whole session riled, to say the least. Morgan messages me later to apologise. As he could tell, I was having my fun ruined, and essentially I was invited to join in on the preparations for a pseudo coup alongside the owner in favour of the narrative players. It wasn't more than a couple of months before the owner started to draft a plan to reduce overall power and cut back on some of the more rampant munchkin combos, and especially on those custom monster templates. Douchebag, the admin, clutches his pearls and leaks the draft to everybody, stirring drama amongst the players, copping himself and Chucklefuck both demotions and then bans. Still, this was not before they caused huge drama, tearing the small rift open into a large gaping wound, leaving with most of the old guard munchkins, including Bitch and husband. Victory then! Victory, isn't it? You've gotten rid of them, they're gone. The owner basically quit after that. The drama took such a huge toll on her, and thus Morgan and I found ourselves with mod privileges and in charge of the whole place, aggressively slashing at the munchkins' most favoured tricks, but unfortunately causing ourselves another, more fatal fracturing in the bedrock of the server by maybe taking some things too far. Okay, alright. Okay. If you still know this person, the owner of that server, feel free to give him my email. Because I've always wanted to run a server, not like this, right? But write a world completely and then have people just roleplay in it, and I'll be able to roleplay in it as well. So if she wants to run a server, give her my email. Seems like she got her heart in the right place. Part 3. Erasmel Bad. Erasmel Bad? What? A diversion. Okay, let's jump in. Part 3. I would like to divert now and go back a ways, simply to impress on you just how bad the munchkin problem got, by pointing out and making a case study of the worst of the lot. Let me introduce you to a lad playing this absolute crack case of a character called Aramil Stonebringer. Aramil was a wizard gestalt kineticist. Think like a bender from the Avatar The Last Airbender. I always remember about that movie, watching that movie back in the day, and I swear to God, like I'm sitting there trying to watch this movie, and one of the guys in the show, or in the movie, just stands up and says, "I am a bender," and I just started pissing myself laughing. My girlfriend at the time, who's a big Avatar fan, was not very amused. Anyway, moving on. So he was like a bender from the last Avatar, of the Last Airbender, with a busted template, keying his kineticist powers off of intelligence rather than constitution, along with like 8 plus stats across the board. Plus 8 stats, sorry, across the board. His combat MO was to meld with the floor and blast attacks up out of the floor from total safety, which it turns out was an illegal move, as you can't see someone for line of sight spells with just tremor sense. Okay? But that wasn't the worst bit. The worst bit was the wizard side by far. Pathfinder wizards are amazingly powerful casters, with a spell for pretty much everything, and given time for prep, a good wizard beats anything, period. This is okay if you're a regular person who will self-regulate and follow the rules about ritual casting and components and crafting time and will let the GMs know about it in advance. This was Amaril, however, and he supposedly did a ton of wacky shit. He summoned a succubus, cloned her 6 times, and took a profane gift to each of his stats. A +2 to a stat, usually with roleplay downsides, but look at that. He never involved the GM to give him those, okay? He summoned a soul angel and cloned it a bunch of times to farm wishes. He cloned 1,000 commoners to work the fields in his demi-plane. He set a magical booby traps all over the place, yada 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 yada. Okay. None of it was ever announced in chat, made specifically for things like this, and neither were half his crafted items, or really anything that he did. So, we couldn't confirm if he actually spent the time and materials on them, or whether or not he double-dipped on downtime or anything. His reason for not announcing it, and I quote, "Well, if I announce it, the GMs can plan out how to get around it and all my security, and build a perfect counter for it. I don't want to give them a chance to do that," unquote. Jesus Christ, this guy sounds like a nightmare. He gamed everything. His alignment was true neutral, and his deity was the chaotic good goddess of travellers, stars, and luck and butterflies. Of course, this lets him have a near complete lack of moral obligations on his character, keyword being near. In one of MMO's gigantic 10-hour marathon boss raids, Amaril did enough damage in one turn to make my character actually a rounding error in the math there. I did 46 damage and he did 1,152. Round to the nearest 100, and you have to add 48, which is more than I did. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. So round it to the next 100. Oh my god, that's so funny. The downfall of Amaril was spectacular, however. Morgan was running a personal backstory quest for my character. To save time on the retelling, they were on the plane of air, looking for her lost family, when a demigoddess of luck, disguised as a childhood friend of my character, was gambling with us for information. Now, let me repeat what was going on. My character, who had her combat overshadowed by damage inflation, who had her skill challenges interrupted by murder hobos regularly, who basically never had her time in the sun or any attention at all, she was on a quest to find her missing family, and role-playing the information out. She was having her one moment in the spotlight, on her one backstory session. Then, I put the roleplay into setting up. Because this is gambling with a luck deity, I obviously lost the first round and was going to go in for double or nothing. Morgan later said that he would have let me win if I doubled down, and all of a sudden Amaryl barges into the moment and demands that she tell us what we wanted, because you said to play you for the information and we played. Now give us the information. You never said we had to win to get it, only that we had to play. This argument, both in and out of character, takes 3 hours and completely steals all of the momentum from the story. At the end of the session, Morgan announces that Amaryl can no longer benefit from any luck bonuses. The demigoddess, who was still disguised and who we didn't know was divine at this point, had gotten annoyed enough to curse him. He flips his proverbial shit, and as a part of that, summons a lesser servant of his goddess, who is also a luck deity, and hands the servant a letter demanding answers from her. Now, demanding answers from a major deity in writing is the height of blasphemy and insult, even for the most laid-back girl in the pantheon, but still, instead of just smiting him, as a mercy to him, one of the lesser deities in this chain of command intercepts the letter and comes to Amaryl comes to give Amaryl his own Book of Job moment. He tells him that it's not the main goddess's fault. He has to make right with the demigoddess who we met on the plane of air, and to not be so haughty as to ever try the trick of sending a letter ever again. It doesn't work, but he stops playing for a while in a huff. A few months later, after a change in leadership, he comes back, and as the slashing down on Munchkin behaviour has started, he has started to resubmit his sheet for a review. Everybody had to. And one of our GMs, bless her, went through and audited every single gold coin, every single reported downtime action and benefit on the sheet. She checked every detail with a fine-toothed comb and managed to make a 7-page bullet point list of everything wrong with the sheet and catching loads of cheating evidence. That's when he left for real, and the trash took itself out. This is the pinnacle of how bad the Munchkins got. Oh my days. We don't have much longer to go, so I'm just going to carry on. I'm enjoying this. So part 4. Bad faith, bad responses, and bad rules. Okay. This is so cool, man. This is really, really cool. Back to the main arc of the story. And this is the bit that hurts me the most. After the Munchkins were ousted from power, the whole server united, more or less, in that direction of reducing power levels, and we set to work auditing sheets like pros and patching rules with gusto. Unfortunately, a new fissure emerged slowly. One derived directly from the fact that we were essentially playing 2 different games using the same skeletal structure at the same time. Spheres, as I said before, is relatively internally balanced, but Pathfinder is far less so, but it's still okay. But matching the 2, especially in the context of Mythic and Gestalt, and things get pretty nasty. As time went on, it slowly became clear that they were pretty incompatible if you cared about anything but munchkinning. And so, we began to argue. Some people argued for removing spheres entirely, others for removing base, and Morgan and I trying to hold things together. The fighting between Spheres fans and base fans enjoyers kept tensions high and people on edge, waiting for that final straw to snap. Several good people left, as the time this fight happened over and over and over again. It was getting quite unhealthy. Part 5. On vampires. At this point you might be asking, why the hell are you still playing and why haven't you quit? And that's a very valid question. We didn't leave because despite all the issues, even at this very late stage as the cracks open up, we have just had some of the best adventures ever as the true power of storytelling in such a high power and persistent world comes out. So, picture me having just watched Netflix's Castlevania and having an itch for vampire stories. I put out a session ad on the server and I get players interested in my plot. You have Morgan's new character, Amy the Inquisitor, who worships a deity that is undead Slanesh, Percival the griffin-riding paladin, and Edwin the speedster/fighter. There are others who come and go, but these three remain as the most invested part of the core party. They are sent out to investigate a haunting at the manor of an old noble family, and they discover some horrible truths. The ghost is real. She is the vengeful and terrified spirit of the grandmother who was slain by the vampiric grandfather of the current Baroness, also a vampire. The old Baron was horrifyingly only staked, and not truly destroyed, and the party realises that just in time to find an old servant of the old Baron releasing him from his coffin. The fight rages across the house until the Baron retrieves his old weapon, a Vorpal dueling sword, and forces both sides to retreat. The ghost is banished by Amy, the current Baroness flees to her safe house, and the old Baron whisks himself off to his own hideout. Percival found a book of heretical knowledge, detailing necromancy spells, dark rituals, and other secrets of the hidden vampire bloodline collected through the centuries, and the party determined to use that as a trap. Both enemies wanted the secrets. The current Baroness took the bait and arrived at the manor with some ghoulish servants. In the ensuing fight, Percival is charmed and made to cover her retreat, but the party still manages to bring her to 0 HP, at which point she escapes to her coffin as a cloud of mist to regenerate. They catch up to her and find that what they think is her coffin. Alas, they took the longer, safer route, and a magically altered body double was laid in her place. Dude, you are a really, really, shall we say, gotcha-ing. You do half like your gotchas, don't you, as a GM? You've got to give them a win at some point. Throughout the story, the party is not doing things in session. The persistent nature of the game world means that even if it's not a time when everyone can make it to a session, 1 or 2 players can roleplay with each other or ping me to do research or investigation. While Percival is unravelling the old Baron's backstory, Amy is convincing the Baron that she's actually on his side, seducing him and pulling info out of him. Edwin is looking for information on the Vorpal sword, and the plot is moving along at this very continuous pace, even without regular sessions. At some point, the Baroness sneaks into Percival's house, and reactivated the charm and convinces him to hide her. Reading what progress he's made on translating the book, and never making him do anything that would cause him to violate his paladin oaths, essentially, she has him magically convinced of her being an innocent victim who wanted to change, which placed her in the paladin mental category of person to protect. This also comes to a head with when the Baroness tries to assassinate Amy, who is her biggest rival and is again traced back to her hiding place. Percival is snapped out of the charm, and in a dramatic and tragic scene, the Baroness is slain by his very hand, staked through the heart, and, by her last wish, allowed to see the sunrise for the last time. That is kind of tragic. Now, the party uses all of their information about the vampire Baron, his tragic background story, his weakness and strengths, and a magic shield crafted by the elven smiths that made the sword, which could remove the Vorpal enchantment from it. The Vorpal enchantment from it. They goad the Baron into a fight under his balcony, using his backstory, and raid his base in a big climactic showdown. There are a few tense fights, and then they arrive as he stands in the central chamber. Unbeknownst to me, there was an alternate plan in the making. The arc had lasted through levels 3 to 10, and the whole time Percival had been stacking bonuses to his disarm maneuver. So, when he gets his first initiative, he charges the Baron and rolls like a 42 to knock away the Baron's sword. It's now a mad dash to grab it off the ground, and Edwin the speedster gets there first, of course. 70 odd foot movement in a single move action will do that. The Baron chases her into a corner and as I narrate him grabbing her by the throat and squeezing her as he lifts her off her feet, someone reminds me that such a move would provoke an attack of opportunity. I have a roll the attack with the sword, and wouldn't you know it, natural fucking 20. For those in the audience that aren't aware, Vorpal weapons decapitate their targets on a natural 20, one of the few instant death mechanics in the game. So, naturally, the climactic boss fight of my 7-level story arc lasts all but 2 rounds, as the ancient vampire gets his magic sword stolen and used to chop his own head off. A wooden stake would quickly follow, and thus he died in a hilarious but still cool anticlimax. Stories like this still happened, with all of their ups and downs, and just so much fun for everybody involved. We still had a good time despite the admittedly large problems that we faced out of the game, which is why we didn't quit, and why what's coming next hurt so much. Alright, the final part, here we go. Final straws. Part 6, final straws. The final straws and the server's death knell came in the spring of last year, as I was graduating college and all of a sudden I was short on time to dedicate to the server. There came a player in the munchkin mould of old, with just one of the strangest personalities, and 2 was an incredibly challenging person to build around. They were the kind of person who was always right, always arguing, always remorseful when confronted, always causing fights, but being good at playing with other sympathy. And good with never technically breaking the rules. This person seemed unable to comprehend why so many characters disliked his brash, narcissist of a min-maxed mess he called his character. Dude, there are so many people that I know who are like that. Not so many people I know who like just like that, but the ones who are dickheads, but they're clever enough to never break the rules. Do you know what I mean? Those are the ones. Those are the ones. I can't stand them. It was very draining. Regularly, I would have to log on and mediate fight after fight after fight between him and other players, especially the player of Percival from the Vampire arc. Eventually, after a particularly nasty fight, where the new player had managed to drive a further wedge between the already fracturing fans of the 2 different game systems, I decided to give out a rule strike to everybody involved. It takes 2 to fight after all, but I could have been better at making decisions, now that I have hindsight with me. Well, it's always good to admit your mistakes, man, no problem. The plan to punish everybody was very unpopular, and, with my out-of-game stress, the amount of friends that I had already quit in bad moods, and the harrowing experience of constant drama pressing in, it shouldn't be too surprising that I shut down when presented with 2 contradictory ultimatums from 2 different friends, to either fully ban this problem player or let him completely off the hook. I resigned instead, and that snapped what little will there was to keep the games going. A few days later, Morgan put the game on indefinite hold, and the server died. Oh my god. Aftermath and lessons. I was crushed for a pretty long time. I loved the game, I loved the adventures we had, and I mourned the loss of potential. I withdrew into myself, and had a summer retail job, and essentially quit Pathfinder altogether, sadly having run out of the enthusiasm that I needed. I was really hurt by the experience, and it's taken a long time to recover from it, to be honest with you. I've only recently gotten back into touch with Morgan. I was worried for the longest time that he blamed me. In general, I lost contact with quite a few of my friends from that time, making everything just so much harder. But now I've moved across the country. I'm working custodial for the local college, where I am going for my masters. I am picking up more Warhammer, and recently I even joined a new game of Pathfinder with Morgan, just not a massive server like that one. Things are looking up, to such an astonishing degree that I could have never actually foreseen it, and which I certainly didn't think it would get to in the depths of my depression post-death of the server. And that's the real moral of the story, I guess. Things will always get better eventually. don't despair. The pain does eventually fade. Anyway, thank you so much for reading this. It really helped me to share it. Thanks to everybody who made it to the end of the story. Yeah, thank you very much if you did make it to the end of the story. Well done. And thank you, North, for all the entertainment you provided for me. Cheers, JP. No problem, man. And yeah, this is something I've been looking into for quite a while, is setting something up, like role-playing wise, on my own Discord server. It would take a lot of work and a lot of time, but it's something that I would do as long as people want to run it separate from me. They want to do that, that's fine. I have no problem doing that. I can provide the setting and, you know, and the rules, and you guys just have at it, you know, go for it. I'll even play as well, even play in it, make sure that everyone's having fun, right? Do that kind of a thing. So yeah, if anyone wants to do that, if this story has reached out to you and you think that sounds really fun, if we could just not have the munchkins there, that would be really fun. Well, maybe we could do one together. Maybe this summer. We'll see. Going into it, hope you're all having a wonderful week. I'll be back tomorrow, where I'm going to be sharing some thoughts on the 10th edition box set Leviathan and its pricing and its rare nature, which is really getting under my nose. So look forward to that one. There'll be more Hobby Nightmares on Friday. Love you a long time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll speak to you later. Have a good one. Bye.